one of the earliest signs that love is beginning to grow. In a man is not necessarily what he says, it's the shift in his energy when he sees you. Before feelings are confessed, before relationships are defined, emotions often reveal themselves through behavior. And one of the most honest forms of behavior is emotional reaction. When a man is genuinely excited to see you, something changes in him almost instantly. His attention sharpens, his expression softens, his mood lifts in a way that feels natural rather than forced. Even if he was distracted, stressed, or emotionally distant moments before, your presence creates a visible shift. And that shift matters because human beings naturally become emotionally responsive around people who hold emotional significance in their lives. What makes this so powerful is that it usually happens unconsciously. A man can carefully control his words, but controlling emotional energy is much harder. The body often reacts before the mind has time to manage it. That's why someone who secretly has growing feelings may suddenly smile without realizing it, become more animated in conversation, or instinctively focus all of his attention on you the moment you appear. Psychologically, this happens because emotional attraction activates anticipation and reward within the brain. When someone becomes emotionally important to us, their presence triggers positive emotional stimulation. We associate them with comfort, excitement, curiosity, or emotional relief. Over time, simply seeing them begins to create an emotional response automatically. This is why excitement is such a meaningful sign. It reveals emotional investment. A man who is emotionally indifferent may enjoy your company, but his emotional state remains relatively unchanged around you. A man whose feelings are growing experiences your presence differently. You affect him emotionally. And people rarely become emotionally affected by someone they do not deeply value. You'll often notice this in subtle behaviors. He becomes more engaged when you speak. His posture changes slightly. His tone becomes warmer or more enthusiastic. He may immediately want to know how you are, what you've been doing, or how your day has been. These moments may appear small on the surface, but they reveal something psychologically important. Your presence has become emotionally meaningful to him. What's interesting is that this excitement is rarely just about physical attraction. Physical attraction can create temporary excitement, but emotional excitement carries depth. It's connected to the experience of the person themselves. He's not simply reacting to how you look, he's reacting to how he feels when he's around you. This distinction matters because emotional connection changes the quality of interaction. When a man is emotionally invested, he becomes more present. He listens differently. He pays attention differently. He values the interaction itself rather than simply the stimulation it provides. There's also vulnerability hidden inside this excitement, because when someone's mood visibly changes around you, it means your presence has emotional influence over them. And emotional influence creates exposure. It reveals that the connection matters. At the same time, it's important to focus on consistency rather than isolated moments. Anyone can appear excited once. But when a man repeatedly lights up around you, repeatedly becomes emotionally energized by your presence, and repeatedly seeks connection with genuine enthusiasm, it often means his feelings are evolving to something deeper. Because love rarely begins with dramatic declarations. More often, it begins quietly in the unconscious happiness someone feels simply because you walked into the room. Once a man's energy begins changing around you, something deeper starts happening internally. He begins looking forward to seeing you in ways he may not even fully admit to himself. And this is where attraction slowly starts becoming emotional attachment. Because anticipation is one of the clearest signs that someone has begun occupying meaningful space in another person's emotional world. A man whose feelings are growing doesn't just enjoy your presence when you're around. He begins emotionally preparing for it before it happens. He thinks about upcoming conversations, remembers plans involving you, and feels a subtle sense of excitement connected to the idea of seeing you again. Even if he never says it directly, your presence starts becoming something he mentally and emotionally looks forward to. Psychologically, anticipation is deeply connected to emotional value. Human beings naturally anticipate experiences that create positive emotional states. We replay them mentally, we imagine them before they happen, and we feel emotionally uplifted by the expectation itself. So when a man secretly begins feeling excited before he even sees you, it means the connection has already started affecting him on a deeper level. This often reveals itself through behavior long before words. He may become unusually responsive when plans involve you. He may subtly rearrange his schedule to create opportunities to see you. He may appear more energized or engaged when he knows you'll be there. These are not random habits. They are emotional indicators that your presence has become internally significant to him. And what makes this especially meaningful is that anticipation cannot be forced for long. People naturally look forward to what emotionally fulfills them. So when a man consistently seeks opportunities to be around you, it usually reflects a genuine emotional connection rather than temporary attraction. You'll notice this in small moments. He replies faster when conversations involve seeing you. He remembers details about upcoming meetings or shared experiences. He brings up future interactions casually, almost as if he wants reassurance that they will happen. These behaviors, RS, reveal emotional investment because emotionally attached people naturally seek continuity of connection. There's also something deeply human about this process. Anticipation creates emotional momentum. The more meaningful someone becomes to us, the more our emotional state begins to organize itself around their presence. Seeing them stops being just another event in the day. It becomes something emotionally charged with expectation and possibility. This is also why his excitement may sometimes feel difficult for him to hide. Even reserved men often reveal emotional anticipation through subtle shifts in energy. Their focus sharpens, their attention becomes more intentional, their mood changes in ways they may not consciously control. Because emotionally significant people affect us before logic has time to intervene. At the same time, anticipation reveals vulnerability. When someone looks forward to seeing you, they are emotionally investing in an experience they cannot fully control. Your reaction matters. The quality of the interaction matters. And that emotional dependence on connection is one of the earliest signs that deeper feelings are forming. What's important is not one collated excitement, but repeated emotional anticipation over time. Does he consistently seem genuinely happy at the thought of seeing you? Does he repeatedly create opportunities for connection? Does his energy subtly lift when your presence becomes part of his day? Because these patterns reveal something powerful. They reveal that you are no longer just part of his environment, you have become part of his emotional experience. And in the end, love often begins long before someone says the words out loud. It begins in the quiet excitement of knowing someone important is about to walk into your world again. As his anticipation of seeing you grows stronger, another shift begins to happen almost naturally. The smallest moments between you start carrying emotional weight for him. Interactions that once would have seemed ordinary now feel meaningful. A brief conversation stays in his mind longer than expected. A simple smile affects his mood. Even a short exchange can become emotionally significant in ways he may struggle to explain logically. This is one of the clearest psychological signs that love is beginning to grow. Because when someone becomes emotionally important to us, RM stops treating interactions with them as routine. The emotional brain assigns value to those moments. And once value is assigned, even small experiences begin to feel amplified. That's why a man who is falling for you often remembers tiny details from seemingly insignificant interactions. He remembers the exact way you laughed at something. He replays a short conversation later in his mind. He notices changes in your tone, your energy, your expressions. Not because he's trying to analyze you, but because emotional attachment naturally heightens attention and memory. This is where emotional connection becomes very different from casual attraction. Casual attraction tends to focus on excitement and surface level stimulation, but emotional attachment creates meaning. Suddenly, the relationship is no longer measured only by dramatic moments. Even silence, eye contact, or a few seconds of genuine connection can feel emotionally powerful. You may notice this in how much importance he gives to small interactions with you. A short message from you improves his mood. A brief encounter becomes the highlight of his day. A simple compliment stays with him longer than it normally would. These are not exaggerated reactions, they are signs that your presence has begun influencing him emotionally on a deeper level. Psychologically, this happens because emotionally significant people activate emotional memory systems in a stronger way. The brain becomes more attentive to emotionally rewarding experiences, especially those connected to attachment and connection. So when he feels emotionally drawn to you, moments involving you naturally become more memorable and emotionally charged. What's fascinating is that he may not even fully understand why these moments affect him so strongly. That's the nature of growing emotional attachment. Feelings often develop beneath conscious awareness before the person fully labels them as love. He simply knows that interactions with you feel different, more meaningful, more emotionally alive. And because these moments matter to him, he begins investing more emotional energy into them. He becomes more present in conversation, more attentive to your reactions, more aware of how he makes you feel. This increased emotional awareness is not accidental. It reflects the gradual shift from attraction into emotional care. There's also vulnerability hidden inside this process. Because once ordinary moments begin carrying emotional meaning, your reactions begin carrying emotional influence. A warm interaction can uplift him. Distance can affect him more deeply than he expects. This emotional sensitivity is often one of the earliest hidden signs of love growing beneath the surface. At the same time, these emotionally meaningful moments slowly build emotional intimacy, not through dramatic declarations, but through repeated emotional experiences that create familiarity, comfort, and connection over time. And this is why you should never underestimate small moments in relationships. People often think love is built only through grand gestures, but emotionally, love usually grows through accumulation. Tiny moments repeated consistently until someone's presence becomes emotionally significant in everyday life. Because in the end, when a man starts finding deep meaning in simple moments with you, it usually means something much deeper is quietly happening inside his heart. As those small moments begin carrying more emotional meaning for him, another transformation naturally follows. He becomes more present around you, not just physically present, but emotionally engaged in a way that feels intentional and focused. Because when a man's feelings begin deepening, his attention changes. He stops interacting passively and starts investing emotionally in the experience of being with you. This is one of the strongest indicators that love is quietly growing beneath the surface. A man who is emotionally attached doesn't just hear you, he listens differently. He notices details. He remembers things you casually mentioned before. He becomes more aware of your reactions, your emotions, your energy shifts, and most importantly, he wants to understand you, not just impress you. Psychologically, attention is one of the clearest forms of emotional investment. Human beings naturally focus more deeply on what emotionally matters to them. So when a man consistently gives you his undivided attention, it's often because your presence has become emotionally important within his internal world. You'll notice this in subtle ways. He maintains eye contact longer. He asks thoughtful follow-up questions. He reacts to things you say instead of simply waiting for his turn to speak. Even in busy environments, his focus repeatedly turns to you. These behaviors reveal emotional presence because emotionally connected people instinctively prioritize each other's attention. And what makes this powerful is that genuine presence is increasingly rare. Many people interact while distracted, emotionally unavailable, or mentally elsewhere. But when a man truly cares, he becomes mentally and emotionally anchored in the interaction itself. He's not simply occupying space beside you, he's actively engaged with your experience. This shift also changes the emotional quality of conversation. Interactions begin feeling more sincere, more thoughtful, more emotionally alive. You may notice that he becomes curious about your opinions, your feelings, your goals, or your perspective on life, because emotional attachment naturally creates emotional curiosity. He doesn't just want your attention, he wants deeper understanding and connection. There's also vulnerability hidden inside this attentiveness. Because to be fully present with someone requires emotional openness. It means lowering distractions and allowing yourself to emotionally invest in the moment. And people rarely do this consistently unless the connection genuinely matters to them. What's interesting is that emotional presence often reveals itself most clearly in ordinary situations. It's easy to appear attentive during dramatic or romantic moments. But when a man consistently shows focus, care, and attentiveness during simple, everyday interactions, it reveals something far deeper than temporary attraction. At the same time, this attentiveness creates emotional safety. Being deeply listened to makes people feel valued, respected, and emotionally seen. And when someone repeatedly creates that experience for you, emotional intimacy naturally begins to grow. This is why presence matters more than performance. Some people know how to say impressive things, but emotional presence cannot be fully performed over time. It requires genuine care, genuine interest, genuine emotional investment. And as his feelings continue growing, you'll often notice that he becomes increasingly intentional about maintaining connection. He remembers important details. He follows up on previous conversations. He notices your emotional state even when you haven't verbally expressed it. These are all signs that you are becoming emotionally significant to him. Because, in the end, love is not only revealed through grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Often it reveals itself in something much quieter, the rare and powerful ability to make another person feel fully seen, fully heard, and fully present in your attention. His emotional presence around you becomes stronger, something else starts becoming impossible to ignore. The happiness he feels around you begins to look effortless. It no longer feels like performance, flirting, or calculated charm. Instead, it feels genuine, natural, almost instinctive. And that authenticity is one of the clearest signs that love is already beginning to grow. There's an important difference between someone trying to impress you and someone who is genuinely emotionally affected by your presence. A man trying to impress you focuses on managing perception. A man who is emotionally connected focuses less on performance and more on the emotional experience itself. His happiness around you feels real because it is real. You'll notice this in the simplicity of his reactions. He smiles without thinking about it. His energy lifts naturally when you arrive. He becomes more relaxed, more expressive, sometimes even slightly nervous in an honest way. These reactions are difficult to fake consistently because they are emotional responses happening beneath conscious control. Psychologically, genuine happiness around someone is deeply connected to emotional reward. Human-born beings naturally seek experiences that create positive emotional states. And when someone repeatedly becomes associated with emotional comfort, excitement, or peace, then they are said to be in a state of emotional comfort. The brain begins linking that person with emotional well-being itself. This is why a man whose feelings are growing often appears emotionally lighter around you. Even difficult days may soften slightly in your presence. Conversations with you may feel more emotionally fulfilling than ordinary interactions. He may not fully understand why your company affects him so strongly, but emotionally, he experiences your presence as something positive and meaningful. And what makes this especially important is consistency. Temporary attraction can create excitement in isolated moments, but authentic emotional happiness tends to repeat itself naturally over time. You'll see it in the way he consistently enjoys being around you without needing external reasons or dramatic circumstances. This kind of emotional response also creates openness. When people feel genuinely happy around someone, they naturally lower emotional defenses. They become more authentic, more spontaneous, more emotionally available. That's why a man developing deeper feelings may begin revealing parts of his personality he doesn't easily show to others. Around you, he feels emotionally safe enough to relax into himself. There's also vulnerability hidden inside authentic happiness, because genuine joy reveals emotional dependence in subtle ways. If someone consistently affects your emotional state positively, their presence starts mattering more than you intended. Their attention becomes emotionally valuable. Their absence becomes more noticeable. And this emotional significance is often one of the first signs that attraction is evolving into love. What's fascinating is that genuine emotional happiness often communicates more truth than words. People can say all the right things while feeling emotionally disconnected, but authentic emotional energy is much harder to manufacture. That's why watching how someone consistently feels around you often tells you more than listening only to what they say. At the same time, authentic happiness creates emotional momentum in relationships. It makes connection feel effortless rather than forced. Interactions become something both people naturally seek because the emotional experience itself feels rewarding. And when a man repeatedly experiences that emotional reward around you, his attachment deepens quietly over time, not through dramatic moments alone, but through the repeated realization that your presence genuinely improves his emotional world. Because in the end, one of the clearest signs that love is growing is simple. Someone stops pretending to enjoy your presence and starts genuinely feeling happier because you exist within it. When you step back and look at all of these signs, together the shift in his energy, the anticipation of seeing you, the emotional meaning attached to small moments, his attentiveness, and the genuine happiness he feels around you begin to understand something important. Love often reveals itself through behavior long before it is spoken aloud. This is why excitement matters so much. Not surface level excitement, not temporary attraction, but consistent emotional enthusiasm for your presence. Because when a man repeatedly becomes emotionally energized by seeing you, it usually means something deeper is already forming inside him. Human beings are emotional creatures before they are logical ones. We often feel things before we fully understand them. A man may not yet have the words to explain what's happening emotionally, but his behavior begins revealing it anyway. His attention changes, his priorities shift, his emotional responses become stronger and more consistent. And without realizing it, he starts emotionally organizing parts of his life around the connection he feels with you. Psychologically, this happens because emotional attachment develops gradually through repeated positive emotional experiences. Each meaningful interaction strengthens emotional familiarity. Each moment of comfort, excitement, or connection deepens the bond. Over time, the emotional significance of the person grows until their presence begins affecting mood, thought patterns, and emotional stability itself. That's why a man who is secretly falling in love often appears emotionally different around the woman he cares about. He becomes more aware of her reactions, more invested in conversations, more emotionally responsive to her attention and energy. These changes are not calculated, they are natural consequences of growing emotional attachment. And what makes this especially powerful is that genuine emotional excitement cannot hidden forever. Feelings always seek expression in some form. Even when words are absent, behavior begins communicating what the heart is struggling to contain. You'll often see this inconsistency over time. He keeps showing up emotionally. He continues seeking interaction. He continues becoming visibly happier around you. He remembers details, values moments, and treats ordinary interactions as emotionally meaningful. These repeated behaviors reveal emotional investment far more honestly than dramatic confessions made in a single moment. There's also vulnerability inside this excitement, because once someone begins emotionally depending on your presence for joy, comfort, or emotional uplift, they become emotionally exposed. Your reactions start mattering more. Your absence becomes more noticeable. Your
approval carries emotional weight.
And this vulnerability is one of the clearest signs that love is beginning to grow beneath the surface. At the same time, this kind of emotional attachment changes how someone experiences connection itself. Interactions stop feeling transactional or casual. They begin feeling emotionally valuable. Time together feels important rather than compared. Convenient. Presence feels meaningful rather than ordinary. This is why you should always pay attention to emotional patterns rather than isolated gestures. Anyone can create a romantic moment once, but genuine love reveals itself through sustained emotional consistency, through repeated excitement, through authentic presence, through the inability to remain emotionally neutral around someone who has become deeply significant to you. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all this is that real love often begins quietly, not with dramatic speeches or perfect timing, but with small emotional reactions that slowly become impossible to ignore. A smile that appears too naturally, a mood that changes too quickly in your presence, a consistent happiness that keeps returning whenever you walk into the room. Because in the end, when someone is genuinely excited to see you again and again, what you're witnessing is not just attraction, it's the quiet beginning of love taking root inside the heart.